I recently bought a 10.5-inch iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil. I couldn't find any videos comparing Lightroom Mobile to Affinity Photo, so decided to make one myself. So I'm launching Lightroom Mobile. This is the 2.8.1 version from early August 2017. The selective brush has recently been added. This is a photo of me. The first thing I'm going to do is edit the photo in the healing part of Photoshop Fix, as there is no sort of healing brush in Lightroom. Using the Apple Pencil, I'm setting a suitable size for the healing brush. I'm going to use this to paint out some of the more obvious blemishes. Pinching with 2 fingers to zoom and reposition. Every time I paint out a spot, the display shows red for all the locations I've used the healing brush. It's really easy and effective, and I can do it quite quickly. It's much more tricky to retouch blemishes which span wrinkles. It is possible using the intricate small-sized healing brush or using a larger brush and a much smaller restore brush in Photoshop Fix, which paints back the original pixels. The patch tool seems to use your last bit of painting with the healing brush as the destination, and then you have the ability to select a source for the content-aware fill that it provides. I couldn't get it to easily manage blemishes across wrinkles. The next thing I'm going to do is save and return to Lightroom. You will notice this produces a new file because it's a destructive type edit. Back in Lightroom, I'm going to select an adjustment brush. Clicking on the large plus size, I'm choosing the adjustment brush on the left. I'm going to go into effects and reduce the clarity to -100. I've seen various recipes used for skin smoothing, but this is the simplest, and that's as good as there are no presets in mobile Lightroom. The nice thing about this is that the Apple Pencil is pressure sensitive with opacity proportional to pressure. This means you can press harder over more wrinkly areas and softer over smoother areas. It's fairly quick. The other sorts of recipes I've seen have involved increasing the sharpness +25, possibly with contrast reduced as well as reducing the clarity. When I compared these various recipes using Lightroom on my laptop, I couldn't see any difference to the simply -100 on the clarity, so I've kept it simple. As with Lightroom on the laptop, you can alter the level and what adjustments you use after you've painted with the adjustment brush. This means that there's a large amount of flexibility. Obviously, if you adjust the settings, the brush can be used for reducing or increasing exposure, for dodging and burning, or can be used to increase the sharpening and or clarity, to sharpen up eyes, or anything else you fancy. Using the icon that looks like an open door bottom left, I can show the photo with and without adjustments. There is a long enough lag that it's not that brilliant a way of assessing what is a relatively mild change, as in this case. I'm now going to swap over to using Affinity Photo on the same raw file. I'm importing through the raw develop process without adjusting the defaults. I'm going to duplicate the background layer so I have a copy if I mess editing up. I'm going to select the filters and from them the frequency separation filter. Once I have the frequency separation filter selected, I'm going to increase the radius on this filter a little and apply the filter. When I rehearsed this retouching, I thought the default radius level was a little low. That's why I've altered the defaults. What the filter does is split the photograph into a grayscale layer that represents the detail and a slightly blurred layer that represents tone and colour. That's the high frequency layer, and that's the low frequency layer representing tone and colour. These two layers are blended using linear light rather than normal blending, and this produces the original image. Now I'm going to select the lower layer to paint into. From the clone brush tools, I'm going to select the healing brush. You can alter the size, flow, opacity and hardness of the brush. You have to select the area to sample from using your finger before you can paint with your pencil. What you are seeing with the black cross is the sample area, not the area on which I'm painting, and it resets every time I take the pencil away. I'm basically selecting various reasonably even toned areas of skin and painting into blotchy areas. There is a particular area over my right eye where there is a significant brown age spot which covers a wrinkle, and I left this area alone using Lightroom and Photoshop Fix. Using this frequency separation method, I can tackle it. My skin shows a combination of age and mild seborrheic eczema, which is pretty common. So I have blemishes, blotchiness, dry skin, age spots, etc., etc. With this method, I am able to sort out these by sampling from less blotchy areas and painting with a healing brush onto blotchy areas, thus sorting out the blotchiness. Within the Clone tool panel, I can choose the clone, healing or in-painting brush to do this. In general, painting in the low frequency layer uses lower opacity and hardness, and the clone brush is less useful than in the high frequency layer when I'm dealing with detail. This is a very different process to the simple reduction in clarity with Lightroom adjustment brush, and I think produces better results. But it's quite possible to overdo things using this method. To be honest, most of my photography is sports photography of runners, and I would not be using this process when I take about 600 photos during a 5K run. Other refinements to this method include adding a blank pixel layer above the low frequency layer and then sampling from the low frequency layer using any of the brushes I've talked about. Painting into this blank layer means you can subsequently reduce the opacity of the smoothing painting and also erase something if you find you've gone too far. I've also seen duplicating the low frequency layer and applying a blur to this, which for Affinity photo would be the bilateral blur. This layer is then masked with a black clipping mask and then painted into with white to reveal it in areas that need smoothing. I'm now going to select the high frequency layer. Again, I'm going to select the healing brush tool so that it takes several pencil strokes to build up the smoothing of the wrinkles. I'm going to reduce the flow on this a bit. There we go. Again, I'm using my finger to select a smooth area of skin to sample from, and then I'm going to paint over the wrinkles. Basically, you are separating the correction of tone and colour from the correction of detail, or in this case wrinkles, and this means that it is much easier to repair areas of blotchiness which occur over wrinkles without making the whole thing look abnormally retouched. I should emphasize again that I'm not an experienced retoucher, and what I'm doing has almost entirely been learnt through watching instructional videos on the internet. Anyway, I've almost finished, and shortly I'm going to show you the photos for comparison as a screencast from my laptop. You can see this method makes the wrinkles in my chin area just sort of melt away and doesn't make the change too terribly obvious. Clicking back in the browsing page of Affinity Photo saves it. It takes a few seconds. I've exported this photo as a full-size JPEG from Affinity. To get a full-size export from the Lightroom version, I needed to do that from Lightroom on my laptop. The photo gets to my laptop automatically with Adobe syncing a folder as part of Creative Cloud. The original file was imported through Photoshop from the RAW file. Although all versions use the default RAW processing, there is some tonal difference, which I suspect is because the engines and defaults are slightly different between Photoshop, Lightroom, and Affinity Photo. I think the overall result is best from the photo edited through frequency separation in Affinity Photo. As mentioned earlier, this has successfully removed the age spot over my right eye, which it was not possible to do through Lightroom Mobile. I won't be giving up my Photoshop Creative Cloud subscription, but I will be using Affinity Photo on the iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil when I need to use any sort of painting tool.